Every year, the ground beneath New Zealand moves roughly 20,000 times. Most of those movements are imperceptible, too faint for a person to notice, detected only by sensitive instruments buried in the earth. But around 250 of them are felt. Doors rattle, shelves shift, windows flex in their frames. And then it stops, and people get back to their day. This is not a country that experiences earthquakes. This is a country that is an earthquake, one that happens to have cities on top of it. New Zealand sits on the boundary between two of Earth's major tectonic plates, the Pacific Plate and the Australian Plate. These two plates are grinding against each other at a rate of roughly 40 to 50 millimeters per year, about the speed at which your fingernails grow. That might not sound like much, but over millions of years, that relentless, grinding movement has done something extraordinary. It has pushed an entire country out of the ocean. And that same force, the one responsible for creating this place, is also what makes it one of the most geologically dangerous nations on Earth. This is the paradox at the heart of New Zealand, and to understand it, you have to start with a fault line. Running almost the entire length of New Zealand's South Island is a geological structure called the Alpine Fault. It stretches approximately 600 kilometers from Fiordland in the south to the Marlborough region in the north, tracing a long, almost perfectly straight line along the western edge of the Southern Alps. It is one of the most significant tectonic boundaries on the planet, and it is, right now, locked. The Alpine Fault sits at the point where the Pacific Plate and the Australian Plate are doing something unusual. They are not simply moving apart or one sliding beneath the other. They are sliding sideways past each other while also colliding head-on, simultaneously. The result is a fault that does two things at once. It shears horizontally as the plates grind past each other, while also compressing vertically, pushing rock upward. The horizontal movement alone accumulates at roughly 30 meters every 1,000 years, very fast by global standards. That compression, sustained over 12 million years, has pushed the Southern Alps up by an estimated 20 kilometers in total. The only reason the mountains don't tower to those heights today is that erosion, glaciers, rivers, and rain, has stripped most of that uplift away, depositing it across the Canterbury Plains and onto the ocean floor. What remains is a mountain range built by collision, constantly being worn down and constantly being rebuilt. New Zealand is not finished. It is a work in progress. The Alpine Fault does not release its energy gradually. It stores it. In between major earthquakes, the fault is locked, the two plates gripping each other like a vice, pressure building over decades and centuries. When that grip finally fails, it fails catastrophically. Scientists studying the fault have traced its earthquake history back thousands of years using lake sediments, tree rings, and carbon-dated rock samples. What they found is striking. The Alpine Fault ruptures with unusual regularity. It has broken 4 times in the past 900 years. The approximate dates were around 1100 AD, 1450 AD, 1620 AD, and 1717 AD. The average interval between those ruptures? Approximately 330 years. Each time it broke, it produced an earthquake of around magnitude 8. For context, a magnitude 8 earthquake releases roughly 30 times more energy than a magnitude 7.
At least 65 people are dead and parts of Christchurch are in ruins after another powerful earthquake hit New Zealand.
The 2011 Christchurch earthquake, which killed 185 people and caused an estimated 40 billion New Zealand dollars in damage, was magnitude 6.3. An Alpine Fault rupture would release more than 900 times that energy. The last rupture was in 1717. That was 309 years ago. The fault's own historical average suggests it is not overdue in a strict mathematical sense, but it is squarely inside the window where a rupture becomes likely.
GNS Science, New Zealand's National Geological Authority, estimates the probability of a major Alpine Fault rupture at 75% before the year 2068. There will be no warning. Scientists believe the rupture would begin in southwestland and unzip northward along the fault, a rupture that could involve 400 kilometers of fault line moving in a single event. The South Island would shake for approximately 3 minutes. Landslides would close the mountain passes. Bridges and roads across the west coast would be destroyed. Power infrastructure would fail across much of the South Island. International rescue assistance would be required. This is not speculation. It is the output of a detailed government planning program called Project AF8, an initiative that has spent years modeling the Alpine Fault earthquake, hour by hour, region by region, so that when it comes, New Zealand is not caught unprepared. The question AF8 asks is not whether the earthquake will happen. The question is whether the country will be ready. 300 kilometers to the northeast of the Alpine Fault, sitting at the southern tip of the North Island, is the city of Wellington. Population, approximately 215,000 people. Role, the capital of New Zealand, home to Parliament, government ministries, the National Museum, and the country's central bureaucracy. Wellington sits directly on the Wellington Fault. This is a separate active fault system capable of producing a magnitude 8 earthquake of its own, with a recurrence interval estimated at between 500 and 770 years. The most recent rupture of the Wellington Fault's main section is estimated to have occurred somewhere between 150 and 450 years ago. That places the fault, depending on which estimate you use, either already past its average return interval or approaching it. GNS. Science modeling suggests that a magnitude 7.4 earthquake on the Wellington Fault, striking during business hours, could cause around 350 deaths and 2,800 injuries in the city alone. But the death toll is not the most alarming part of that scenario. Wellington's geography makes it uniquely vulnerable to something other cities are not: isolation. The city sits at the end of a narrow peninsula, connected to the rest of the North Island by a limited number of road corridors. A major rupture could sever those connections entirely, leaving a city of more than 200,000 people cut off from the rest of the country for weeks. More recent research from Victoria University of Wellington has found something that makes this picture even more concerning. The basin of soft sediment beneath Wellington's central business district could amplify earthquake shaking by up to 3 times in a narrow corridor near Lambton Quay, meaning that shaking in the heart of the capital could be significantly more severe than previously modeled. Wellington knows all of this, and Wellington has not left. This brings us to the most important question, not just about Wellington, but about New Zealand as a whole. Why is any of this still inhabited? The answer has 2 parts. The first is geological. New Zealand does not experience its tectonic energy in one enormous, infrequent release. It distributes that energy constantly, across hundreds of active faults, through thousands of small earthquakes every year, in a continuous process of pressure accumulation and release. The major ruptures, the Alpine Fault earthquakes, the Wellington Fault earthquakes, are part of this system, not exceptions to it. The system bleeds pressure. It does not hold it indefinitely. And the intervals between the truly catastrophic events, the magnitude 8 ruptures, are measured in centuries. Long enough on a human timescale to build a civilization. European settlement of New Zealand began in the 1800s, and the country has never experienced an Alpine Fault rupture in its written history. The second part of the answer is human. New Zealand has had the unusual experience of knowing, with reasonable precision, what its worst-case scenario looks like. It has not looked away. In 1982, a building went up in Wellington that would become one of the first base-isolated structures on Earth. The William Clayton building was constructed on 80 lead rubber bearings, devices that sit between the building's foundations and its structure, allowing the ground to move beneath the building while the building itself remains largely still. The technology was invented by a New Zealand scientist, Dr. Bill Robinson. It has since been used in thousands of buildings across the world. Wellington is now full of structures built on it. New Zealand's Parliament buildings, a 100-year-old masonry structure built before modern building codes existed, was cut from its foundations in the early 1990s so that 417 base isolators could be installed beneath it. The building can now move up to 300 millimeters in any horizontal direction during an earthquake. Te Papa, the National Museum, which opened in 1998, sits on 152 lead rubber bearings. Wellington has, in effect, lifted its most important buildings off the ground. But engineering is only part of the response. On February 22, 2011, at 12:51 in the afternoon, Christchurch discovered what New Zealand had always known intellectually, but had never fully confronted. A magnitude 6.3 earthquake, shallow, directly beneath the city, striking at lunchtime when the streets were full, killed 185 people in 25 seconds. More than 100,000 buildings were damaged. Around 10,000 needed to be demolished. The rebuild was estimated at 40 billion New Zealand dollars. Entire suburbs were deemed uninhabitable due to soil liquefaction and were cleared. Christchurch was not struck by the Alpine Fault. The earthquake that destroyed the city was not even the type of event that GNS science warns most urgently about. It was a magnitude 6.3. What followed was not paralysis. It was a complete national reckoning. Building codes were rewritten. Seismic assessments of existing buildings became mandatory. The government established new land use rules preventing construction in the highest risk zones. Emergency response frameworks were overhauled. Christchurch was catastrophic. It was also the moment New Zealand stopped treating the earthquake risk as a distant theoretical problem and started treating it as a present operational one. There is a version of this story that ends in despair. A country sitting on a geological time bomb, waiting for a rupture that cannot be predicted or prevented. But that is not the whole story. Because the Alpine Fault, the Wellington Fault, the volcanic plateau of the North Island, the geothermal fields, the deep harbors carved by tectonic uplift, none of these are separate from New Zealand. They are New Zealand. Without the collision of the Pacific and Australian plates at this precise point in the South Pacific, there would be no Southern Alps. Without the subduction of the Pacific Plate beneath the North Island, there would be no volcanic plateau, no geothermal energy, no distinctive landscape that draws millions of visitors a year. Without 12 million years of tectonic uplift, the two islands would still be below sea level. There would be nothing here. The forces that built this country and the forces that threaten it are not in opposition. They are the same force, operating on different timescales. On a geological timescale, New Zealand is violent, temporary, and perpetually unfinished. On a human timescale, it is a place where 5 million people have built lives, cities, and institutions, not by ignoring the ground beneath them, but by understanding it well enough to live on top of it anyway. That is the paradox, and it is not a contradiction. It is the deal. New Zealand exists on terms negotiated with the Earth itself, terms that could be renegotiated at any moment, without warning, from somewhere deep below the Southern Alps. And the reason this country shouldn't exist? It's the exact reason it does.